I didn't realize I was people pleasing anymore. I wasn't overgiving. I wasn't saying yes when I meant no. I wasn't burning myself out. But I was deciding quietly which parts of me were safe to bring into the room and which parts were easier to just keep to myself. Hey, friends, I'm Sandy Bartlett, and this is Journey to Self Power Beyond People Pleasing. This podcast is for women who've spent decades being the easy one and are starting to notice what that cost them. Today's episode is part 2 of a 5-part series called Loving Without Shrinking. And there's a partner episode also in my YouTube series. This conversation is for you if you've ever been in a relationship that feels safe and yet you still found yourself choosing silence because it felt easier than explaining yourself. Before we go deeper, I want to name something. This series exists because of something real in my own life. I'm married to someone who doesn't believe what I believe spiritually. There's no conflict, no pressure. It's very much you do you, I'll do me. But I've noticed how much I edit myself, not because he asked me to, but because when the person you love doesn't share your beliefs, it's easy to keep parts of yourself quiet without even realizing you're doing it. That's what this series is about. The card that came through for this conversation is Anna, grandmother of Jesus, from the Work Your Light Oracle deck. Seeding the light, laying foundations, divine plan. Sometimes the most important work happens quietly, not in the big declarations, but in the small, steady choices that shape everything that comes after. This week is about noticing what foundations you've been laying without even realizing it. There was a time in my life when everything looked fine on paper. No fighting, no instability, no big red flags. I was married to someone I loved. We had a good life together, but I noticed something I didn't want to look at. Had started deciding ahead of time what parts of me were worth bringing into the room. Not because anyone told me not to, not because I was afraid of being shut down, but because I didn't want to deal with what happened after. I remember this one morning sitting at the kitchen table, sunlight coming through the window, coffee still hot. My then husband was there reading the paper or scrolling his phone. I don't really remember which. And I'd been reading something earlier that morning, something that made me feel awake, like a light had turned on in a room I'd been walking through the dark. And I wanted to say it out loud, not to convince him of anything, just to share it. But then I felt it, the calculation. How much will I need to explain? How much context will this require? How much energy will it take just to be understood? And in that moment, I made a choice. I poured more coffee and I kept it to myself. Here's what I told myself at the time. It's not a big deal. I don't need to share everything. He wouldn't get it anyway. And all of that was true. But what I didn't see was this. I was people pleasing, just not in the way I used to. I wasn't overgiving. I wasn't saying yes when I meant no. I wasn't bending over backward. But I was doing this, editing myself before I spoke, deciding which parts of me were safe, managing his experience of me instead of just being me. As you're listening, just ask yourself this: where do you go quiet fastest? Not because you're afraid, but because it feels like too much work to be fully seen. Most women think they've outgrown people pleasing because they're not burning themselves out anymore. They're not overcommitted, they're not overgiving, but they miss this version, the one that looks like silence, the one that feels like maturity, the one that sounds reasonable when you explain it. I just don't feel like getting into it. It's not worth the energy. They wouldn't understand anyway. That's not boundaries. That's self-censorship. And it's how people pleasing survives even after you think you've healed it. For our whispers of wisdom, Wilhelm Reich said, "The suppression of the love of life leads to the fear of life." Let me say that. The suppression of the love of life leads to the fear of life. And I think about that a lot because every time you decide something isn't worth saying, you're teaching yourself that your voice has conditions, that your truth needs to be convenient, that expression requires permission. Take a breath with me right now and notice what happens in your body when you think about the last time you decided something wasn't worth bringing up. Does your throat tighten? Does your chest feel heavy? Just notice it. If you learned early that being easy kept you safe, that harmony mattered more than truth, that being understood required too much effort, of course you started editing yourself. That's not weakness. That's adaptation. But here's the cost. Eventually, you stop noticing what you're not saying because it becomes automatic. This is exactly what we name inside my community, Journey to Self, the Awakening. The patterns that hide in good relationships. The ones where nothing's wrong, but something still feels off. No pressure to change, just honest awareness. You'll find the link in the show notes. This week, for your empowerment action, don't try to say more. Just notice the moment you almost speak and you choose not to. That pause, that's the tell. Your voice doesn't need to be louder. It just needs to exist without being edited first. Until next time, be true to you.